To the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center, Something to Talk About. We are sponsored by Fieldstone Memory Care of Bainbridge Island, which offers innovative and compassionate care, and they are accepting residents, and they offer day stay and respite programs as well. If you'd like to tour their apartments on Rolling Bay or learn more about their programs, call 360-689-4314. And I would also like to acknowledge that the Senior Community Center is on the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish tribe, the people of the clear salt water. We honor them, and we are grateful for their hospitality. Today, we're going to talk about allyship, which is the idea of people in positions of some privilege, or people who are not oppressed in some way, using their position, their location in our spectrum of life to assist people who are facing discrimination or oppression. And it can be, I think, a little intimidating to start that. I don't even need to think it. I know it from my personal experience that it can be a little intimidating to start that path, to think about how you can amplify voices of other people without either taking the stage and making it all about you, or that you might misstep and misspeak and cause pain in the effort of trying to stand up and help people. So I'm interested in this being an open and wide-ranging discussion, and I'm hoping that that this is, if not a starting point, sort of a check-in on what it means to be an ally. First, any thoughts on the word ally, what that might mean, whether it's a word that works for you or not? Don.
Yeah, I'd like to add to what you said, Reed, because my experience was in encouraging the Senior Center to form this group. I had to reveal something more about myself than I was comfortable in revealing. So I think that's sometimes a barrier to responses that we might like otherwise to make.
So sometimes it involves, obviously, sharing things about yourself that you might feel uncomfortable.
Correct.
Sharing.
Yeah.
And I would, just jump in here. I'm sorry, I didn't get called on.
That's okay. Call on yourself.
There are, different kinds of allyship. There is personal allyship, where you are dealing with a person right there in front of you, or a member of your family, or a friend, and you're acting as an ally within the confines of your friendship and your family. And then there's also a public allyship, which is supporting, making it clear that you have support, that you believe in equality, that you believe in fairness, that you believe that people need to be respected for who they are. And those are two separate things, because one is more of a public stance, that you take with people who do not know if you know gay people or trans people or have them in your family. That you need to take the opportunity to say, well, look, you're talking about people I know. That we don't become just a group. That you, when you're talking to others, make it clear what your boundaries are on this. That where you come from, and what your support is. So it could be just as much a matter of saying, look, don't talk like that, please. You're talking about people who are part of my family.
Yeah, to me, that's a pretty, that first time you do it can be take a little screwing up of courage, but my experience is that generally people are surprised and back off a little bit. They didn't know that that they were being listened to.
Yeah, that's a great thing, is that a very important point. People say things without thinking. And they're not even listening to themselves. They're just saying something that just comes off reflexively. And that if you point that out to them, not call them out on that, but just say, look, when you say that, I want you to know about this and this, about, my friends, my family, my beliefs.
Mm.
So that it takes a little bit of courage, because you've got to really, interject yourself into any conversation
Yeah.
that suddenly starts going off.
Judy, did you have a comment?
I have some experience, not personally, but as you know, that I am a retired psychologist. And years ago, it was just well, actually, even now, let's see, no, I'm not names or anything, but at our, for example, there's a person at church who we knew in past, and now comes to church, and it is a he who dresses as a woman. And instead of people, at least in my experience, they don't see, the other people don't say anything, but they stare and they whisper with the people who's sitting next to them, for example. And then he who is in dressing as women has a partner who is a woman. And so it's not just only me, but I think people don't know quite to get up with them.
If you don't mind, Judy, my experience is that someone who dresses as a woman coming to church is, I would use the word, the pronoun she for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, the question is why in a church you can't go up and say hi? I just want to make sure that you feel welcome, comfortable, and really, do you prefer she and her now, or
Yeah.
what can you is there anything that we can do to help?
Yeah. Well, this particular man has a name on him, as people do when they're new at the church. I have Judy Tingley. Okay.
Okay.
And however, no, together, he has Mimi, okay, which is a woman's or a child's, young girl, is there.
I'm wondering why, thinking about what Eve just said, why would you not begin to acknowledge that she is Mimi, and that some people do use different names at different times, and go up and say, hello, Mimi, and whatever the partner's name is, how are you, blah, 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 and just lead the way. Like, this is an opportunity for you to kind of use your privilege, I guess, to be friendly and to show others who might be nervous about it that, yeah, of course, it's perfectly okay to step up and say hello to someone, introduce yourself, ask, how they're doing.
Yeah, we, for other reasons, we do. And so, but I have to make a kind of a space, because what you're saying is exactly right.
Trying to recognize that Mimi is a woman and that she is a she. And sometimes that's hard when someone presents very much as a male or female to our normie understanding, to make that leap and sort of say, I understand you are a woman. I'm seeing you as a woman. That's such a huge gift to that person. Laura, do you
Yeah.
want to say something?
Yeah, I was just wondering too, maybe, when we're all filling out name tags at different things, if we all get in the habit of, putting our pronouns on there, I'm Laura, I'm a she, her, and, Mimi, I think probably, it's probably a she, her, maybe it's a they, them, I don't know, but just really get into that habit. I know, one of the children of one of my parents' friends is a she. She wasn't always a she, and my parents can never refer to her without saying, the past. And it's like, let's just move forward, and be with the person that she is, and just embrace that, and not constantly have to, go back. But I know that's just something that sprung to mind as we were talking.
It's really true, though. I mean, when my daughter came out, I'd known her for 35 years as somebody else. And so I have to admit that even as her doting mother, it took me a while, and I still stepped on it until it took, now it's been 6 years and I got it.
I would say, since we're talking about gender here, you have to be willing to make mistakes.
Yes.
People can tell where you're coming from, and they'll understand. So I as a trans woman, know when somebody is making, just doing something, saying something reflexive, or if they're coming to me with some curiosity, or or stumbling into allyship. And there are stumbles to allyship, and I don't think there's any hard and fast rules. And I think that when I came out fully, the thing that I said I wanted most from people was honest curiosity. That this was what it was all about for me. I don't, it was hard for me to come out, to my family and such, because, we weren't doing Zoom back then. Not long, 4 years before the pandemic. And so I was always afraid that, they couldn't see me. So God knows what they were imagining me when I said, I'm trans. And, I had a cousin, Robert, who was just thrilled to, say, not thrilled, but, he said, okay, that's great. Glad to know. I said, Robert, you have any questions, please let me know. I said, honestly, I'm looking for honest curiosity. I don't want, I want to be able to answer your questions. He said, yeah. If I have any questions, I'll let you know. I promise. Over and again, we did this in the conversation. And 10 days later, I get I'm talking to my niece, Sonia, who lived down in the same area. And she said, cousin Robert called. He had a lot of questions about what trans means. And the thing is that he didn't feel like he could ask them of me. And that bothered me more than anything. If as much as it bothered me, I was more amused than anything else. But honestly, it's you have to be willing as an ally to make mistakes. People can tell, the gay or trans person can tell where you're coming from. And they're going to give you a break. And, as to how you handle this, I don't know. There's no magical thing. If you're comfortable, say, hey, is it okay if we sit with you? Just because that's a meaningful gesture to, more meaningful gesture to the rest of the congregation than just talking and walking away. And, churches are supposed to be places of community. And so it would seem that, what you would do normally to draw someone into community is what you should be doing now.
Judy, you are such a kind person. I feel like you're in a wonderful position to be kind of a leader in your congregation, to kind of show people to how to be accepting and a good ally. And, you know, there is no harm in saying, you know, like, as Eve just said, would you, may we sit with you? And then you could even say, if you felt like it, Mimi, I'm curious which pronouns you would prefer that we use. Would you like us to get a tag, name tag that has pronouns? Maybe we could all start doing that. Barbara, you got a comment.
Yeah, I read an article this morning. I think it was in the New York Times, and it was someone who I think recently started identifying as non-binary. And so they talked about the pronoun issue, like in family gatherings. And fortunately, a brother and sister-in-law would correct the other family members when they made a mistake. So it wasn't left on the person to keep reminding. It was, so I thought of that as a nice kind of allyship and education effort.
Yeah, definitely when family members, and it's usually the younger family members who are quicker to pick this stuff up, and gentle corrections, you know, we're all open to, well, hopefully we're all open to that.
You know, I have people who will tell me that they'll take any pronoun you use, you know, and so that if they say that they are she, him, they, you're free to use any one of those. But they are making a statement of either rejecting a binary, or, you know, it can be something that they do in their own sense of allyship. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they are, you know, that they are in some way trans themselves, or fall under the trans umbrella, as wide a, you know, umbrella as that is.
And it is wide, isn't it? I was talking this weekend, I was at the Queer Writers Read, which Eve, you had a wonderful presentation, and it worked.
Well, let's get everybody to see how wonderful I was.
It was. But anyway, I talked to two of the young people who also read their poetry, and both of them self-identified as trans, but I just was talking to them mostly about their poetry was full of references to God and sacrament and rite. And I was saying, boy, I'm kind of struck by that because it seems so bold and unfashionable to talk about God. And they both cracked up and said, well, God is trans. That's why we're all trans. And I was like, wow, what a refreshing, interesting point of view.
Yes, that is good.
It is good. So, you know, anymore, I think, like, especially with younger people, it's good to try to stay a little open about how they might want to be perceived, viewed, held, accepted.
Yeah.
I know it is awkward, Judy. I totally get that. But,
you know, years ago, and again, I was a therapist, but I wasn't doing this, but I knew about it. And people who knew I'm not a man, I'm a woman, or the other way. I know I am. And so these people, and I don't know how this happened, but psychiatrists were doing sort of a vaccinating something or other for somebody change from woman from man, and man from to different back and forth, and these poor people who were, I don't know how it happened or why, but these people were, I haven't heard it at that time because it's a long time ago, but it was for one person suicidal. And that's how, it's certainly understandable, but horrifying.
I'm going to jump in again. Gay people are much more prone to suicidal ideation and, you know, activity, and, you know, attempting suicide than the rest of the population. This is particularly pronounced in, you know, gay youth, and trans people are even more so. and particularly in trans youth. There is a, I can tell you, in my trans groups, the number of people who haven't had suicidal ideation is vanishingly small. And the one thing that they found in the last 10 years is that having support from your family, friends, and community makes a huge, huge difference in your level of risk for either suicide, suicidal ideation, homelessness, and substance abuse goes down to normal. So allyship, making trans and gay people, queer people part of the community, accepting them as part of the community, is the most helpful and healthful thing you can do. Things have changed radically in the last 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever. Changes radically, it seems, every 5 years or 3 months. I can't tell anymore. My friend, Susan, up in Port Townsend, tried to go, decades ago, after she had been married, she and her wife went to, and that's when he was, he at that time, went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, I believe, or Annapolis, but in Maryland. And the rules were that, yeah, they could help, the transition to being Susan. And these were the rules you had to follow. You had to get a divorce. You had to move away from wherever you were. You had to start a completely new life where nobody knew you as your former self. That you were basically put in, witness protection without any of the protection. And the results of that, were that Johns Hopkins decided that, when they did their longitudinal studies on that these people that they had helped were at greater risk of suicide, drug abuse, homelessness.
Of course.
Because they had, but so they said, oh, we're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And Susan and her wife said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to find some other way. And it took them, another, 20 years, but, or 15 years to get there. But things changed. So, making people, allyship is including everyone in the community. We do it here when we, do the land acknowledgement. We want to make sure that tribal people, whether they are here or not, are included and recognized.
One thing that I thought was really interesting at the Young and Queer on the Rock panel at the Art Museum a couple of weeks ago was that one of the presenters said she couldn't really imagine being an older person and queer. Like, how weird was that? Remember, it kind of cracked me up and I thought it was sweet. But Emily, I was really thinking about, also the moderator asked the Queer Elder Group to help support her in keeping some of these programs going, the Saga or Beset. And we would love to do that. And I'd love to hear from you, whether right off the cuff or like in the future or both. What can we do to really support the students in the high school and in the whole school district?
I think I don't have a quick answer to that. I think that's a great question. And it is something that that we think about, that we're concerned about. We've had such an amazing vocal group of students leading so much good work the last couple of years. And I know of a lot of younger kids, actually, sophomores, juniors, who I think are interested into stepping into some of that, but they're going to need, I think, more mentoring. The group that we had that is graduating are a close friend group, and they've worked really hard together over several years. So we're going to have to build that up a bit. So I would love to work with Lena. Lena was the moderator who is not graduating, and maybe make some connections with you all and think about how we can continue this work. I also would really want to work with the Saga group at the school and make sure that they remain a really strong presence, because I think that we find students need both the affinity group where you can be with people who see your honest self and you don't have to explain yourself to anybody. I think that's so important. And then also the advocacy and sort of education piece that the equity team's been doing. So we'll keep having these conversations, and hopefully we'll be able to keep moving this direction. This has been one of the highlights, I think, of the work we've done over the last 4 years. It's been this community connection, and we're so grateful for that.
Well, I did reach out to Lena, and because she's part of the inclusion study group too, and because she had specifically said, will you help? I was like, of course we will. But what does that look like? I don't even know, and maybe she doesn't know. And I'd love to have some conversations, maybe even over the summer, just casually or through the Queer Elders Family Group, of like what we can concretely do, whether it's, provide a place to meet, kids can come to the senior center. Maybe we could become an after school hangout. Safe space that's off campus might be really welcome. I think so many of us feel like we want to make sure that the rising generations get what we didn't have.
So what it sounds like is that we're talking about our allyship here with the youth. But I do want to point out so far that we've talked a lot about gender as gender allies. And there are some gay guys here, and maybe gay women here who may have some views about their experiences. So I don't want to take up all the oxygen.
One thing I'd like to mention is, Emily, if you could consider as you communicate with Anne whether or not if we continue our fourth Friday of the month Zoom or meeting availability through the summer. We haven't concluded on that. We just mentioned it among ourselves, but I wonder if that might be a way for them to have an outreach, or maybe to begin a conversation. Perhaps a couple of them could get together and join the group. We want to make it available. We don't want to just disappear, because the summertime, I think, can be a very it certainly was for me at times growing up, very difficult time to figure out my place in the world. So maybe it could be helpful if we keep that going.
I think that's a really good idea. I know that that this current student group met over the summer for the last couple of years, and that was a really good sort of anchoring point for them. I also wonder whether that might be a way to invite some new young people in, because that would be, I think, really appealing to them. And I just want to thank you all, because for these young people to both see a future for themselves, right? No matter their sexuality, their gender, their identities, like to see what it's like to be a few decades on and thriving in society, and to feel embraced by you all has been really important to them. And so, yeah, I love that idea, Rick. And I will talk to Anne about that.
Good. I want to just reply that I suspect for every one of us in the Queer Elders group that the richness of that encounter has been equal on both sides. It's just been a very emotional feeling sometimes to acknowledge that we can reach out to them as if we were speaking to our younger selves and saying it's gonna be okay. It may be a little difficult, but it's difficult for everybody in the world, but it'll be okay.
Oh, golly.
I found at times, in particular, I'm thinking of a church community that I'm not real good at church, although I'm a reverend and I'm a retired chaplain, and so I'm not good at church. But this particular one, I thought maybe I'd find more open people, and in some ways I did. But what I heard and noticed was that they were making up stories in their mind about who and what I am, and not many of them actually came up and asked me, "Who are you?" what do you want us to know? And I'd say for those who are looking to be allies, get inquisitive, get conversational, and say, don't be afraid to ask some questions. Like Eve was saying, people will know whether you have an honest intent behind them or not. But it's harder to deal with people who have got these stories going, and it's clear they have stories going. They really aren't who you are. So, and I think sometimes, perhaps I'm thinking of this for myself. Sometimes we have to be our own allies. We have to invite those questions directly. And I think that might be some way that we can force ourselves to keep coming out of the closet. So, and not put the onus on others.
Rick, that's an excellent point. I think it's true. It's like, as Judy was saying, that she felt so uncomfortable, didn't know how to approach. So we can maybe be the bridges sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see somebody being really uncomfortable, just maybe making the gesture saying, hi, this is me. Is there anything I could tell you about myself that might be more comfortable for you, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, I had a colleague at another hospital where I was asked to go over there and support that colleague's work. She wasn't particularly well trained at all. She'd never had clinical pastoral education, and she came from a very fundamentalist religious background. And how she got into that position was just she had volunteered from under somebody else who was in a similar position, not well qualified to do the work at all. And when we first got together, she started spouting out of habit how gay people are this and that and so on. And I stopped her cold in her tracks. And I said, well, I'm one of God's children too, and I happen to be gay, and I'm just the way I was meant to be. Now, if we're going to work together, we're going to have to come to a different understanding about judgment of human beings, because you can't do that in this role. That's not your job. And she took herself, she just stepped back, and she realized right then and there how she was working off this habitual conversation going on. And to her credit, she stopped herself and said, and apologized. And later, when I retired, she came to the event and she said, Rick, I'm so glad we had that talk that day, because you don't know what you don't know until you know it. So sometimes we can help people know it. We have to take a stand, but doesn't we have to go against them? But we had to go toe to toe with them and say, I'm here too. And maybe there's more we can talk about. And it's helpful, but it's not comfortable. So, and in the end, we worked together for about 1.5 years. So worked out well.
I think one of the things you learn very quickly when you get starting doing any kind of equity work or ally work is that being uncomfortable is a prerequisite. You have to be okay with that. And, it's like so many things, the more you stretch yourself, the less horrible it feels, to make a mistake or to say the wrong thing. I think, we grew up, all of us, in a shame-based culture, and there's shame just for being wrong in any way, shape, or form. And so I think helping people get past that by modeling, how do you ask those questions? How do you reach out to somebody? How do you befriend a person? Or, like what Eve said, go sit next to somebody if they seem to be being not shunned necessarily, but people looking at them nervously, as was described earlier. Then I think that's the time to step up and be that bridge person.
Well, just to share with you my own personal experience with having become more visible at the senior center, how much better I feel, and how many more people have approached me since that happened with that new understanding of who I am. It's pretty heartwarming.
That's interesting, isn't it? Going from being not certain how you would be received to being received much better than you thought.
Exactly.
And perhaps some of that is some of the fruit of some of the work we've been doing on kind of the panels talking about who we all are and what life is like. I think those things are good teaching tools, really.
I agree, and it was even more heartwarming recently. I won't mention a name, but we had you know about this. We had a contact from an individual recently in the community who just is going to be retiring from his job and looking around for other social contacts, I guess. Was pleased to hear that the senior center had a LGBTQ group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I'm really hoping that as when we had the Young and Queer on the Rock panel, I did explain to the audience, because people were saying, do you have to be a senior to go to the senior center and be part of the queer elder family group? And I was like, no, you're actually allowed to come to the senior center even if you're not a senior. It's amazing, but it's a true thing. And people laughed, but I really want that message to get out there. And Anika, what's your experience like having people be more welcome at the museum or feel welcome in social situations?
I don't know. I was thinking sort of off of what Dawn was sharing, just about how part of what you're doing, like regardless of identity, by sort of being open and generous with yourself, you know, with others, sort of sharing who you are, is also showing other people that you're a safe person to relate to, and that really, I don't know, contributes to creating an environment where, I don't know, maybe other people are in your position, Dawn, feeling like they're not sure how open they can be about themselves or their identity at the senior center, but by seeing you and others being open and being accepted and navigating that environment, that even maybe if someone doesn't feel like, you know, they aren't in a place of confidence in themselves to do that, I just think that makes such a big difference. And especially as we welcome other people into our organizations or groups, you know, at the museum or at the senior center, just it's always sort of like a nice sign. And I don't know, I know when I'm especially doing things with young people, inviting them into the museum, and, you know, we start off an event by saying our names and our pronouns, you see the response, and you see people sort of relax often, and just those little things that you can do to make people know that you're a safe person to talk to or come to, you know, as an adult who's working with young people, or as an adult who's working with people who are older than you. Either way, just I think those things that you can do to make people know that, or let people know that you're there, and you're, you know, someone who will listen to them, is just important.
Anika, taking that to another direction, too, if you know, we play a role, I think, as we're visible in the community, we play a role as potential allies for those who want to be allies. For instance, parents of children struggling with their own identities. So I met saw Derek the other night, the first Friday, at Millstream, and he said he was hoping that the queer elders would have a booth at the Pride event coming up in July. And that's another way for us to put ourselves out there as allies, available to those in the community who are seeking support and understanding and dialogue. So yeah, so hopefully we'll continue that conversation when we get together for our next meeting.
And I know that, you know, we think about, or at least I think about, like, as a young person, you know, having role models, people to look up to and relate to who are queer, or, you know, who that you can relate to in terms of your identity. Just, you know, showing that that is possible is so important. But also, if you think of the, you know, the parents of young queer people, seeing that, you know, here's an example of someone who might have a similar experience to my child, and they're okay, they have a fulfilled life, they have, you know, a community, they're accepted, can really, you know, be really important on people's sort of journey of acceptance to others as well, you know, not just of themselves.
Rita and I both go to the Interfaith Council meetings. And, you know, I think that part of allyship is just building out that kind of connection throughout the community.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the liaison from the Senior Center and Queer Elders to the Kitsap Erase and other equity groups too, and Bainbridge Erase, and a number of them. And I love that we really are stretching our hands out. And every time, like Eve and I are going to do a little talk for, what is it? It's Kitsap.
Kitsap Women's Group, it's just...
It's kind of like Swerve on Bainbridge, but it's for Kitsap women. And we've both been speaking at a number of places, and I think all of us can do more of that. If you're willing and interested, I think we can put together panels and talk to students and parents and grandparents and, you know, congregations, because I think, Rick, you know, you guys are all right when you say people need to hear who people really are behind a tag or a label, and find the people in the in the concept, I guess, right?
I was just going to throw out, you know, I think one of the, you know, powerful things about just being out and being visible is, you know, you do make all these impressions on people, you know, in all the different arenas that you operate in. So, you know, I you know, when I was working, you know, I had a number of coworkers and other friends too, who were parents of kids who were coming out at different stages and whatever. And they were all just so like, they just said like, I'm so glad that I know you and Bonnie and get to see like, you know, this kind of happy, stable future and stuff like that, because it makes me so much less worried about my daughter or my son or whoever. And it just, it makes me so happy. And it, you know, and I feel bad because, you know, my mom was scared to death for me, you know, and so was my dad, you know. And, you know, I've been really, really lucky that I've had such a wonderful life. You know, and I think just being out, just that helps. It just helps other people, and sort of the reverse ally thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think you can still be an ally to everybody else, right?
That's true. Yes.
I mean, you don't have to be straight to be an ally.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the interesting pieces is like we're all ambassadors and we're all allies, and that role is something to explore with pretty much every engagement we walk into or every situation we're in. It's like, oh, how could I be an ally in this or with these people or whatever? I just feel like that's something that we can carry.
We're all in our community, we all have something to contribute. And we can all be allies no matter what. Straight, gay, trans, it doesn't make any difference. And I think we get so caught up sometimes in dividing people that we forget that basically we are so much more alike than we are different. You know, and that comes from so many different things, but we forget how alike we are. If we're parents, we have kids, we want them to be safe. We're grandparents, we want our grandkids to be safe. We want to have grace extended to us, and we want to be able to extend grace to others.
I do feel like fear for kids and grandkids is a big piece of what troubles our older people the most about the sort of explosion of gender exploration or sexual freedom that was really not part of our growing up. Let's be clear. But so and then like being Laura and saying, yeah, here I am making an example, an upfront out example of a perfectly happy, stable relationship. What a huge gift that is, Laura. Like you and Bonnie are shiny stars, right? Because people are like, oh, it can be like that too. Okay, well, that's fun, great, right? That's okay. So readjusting our, inner landscape of what we think we know about whatever, right? It's like, again, another place to be an ally in another way.